In 2013, European football witnessed one of the biggest derbies on the continent in the ultimate stage. Except, here's the catch, no one expected it to happen. When Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund made it to the Champions League final in 2013, it wasn't just historic, it was impressive. Not only did they make it there, they'd each had to knock out two of the tournament favourites along the way, and they did it with style. And so, that night in Wembley, history was about to be made. Whatever happened, the Champions League trophy was going back on the plane to Germany. But we're getting ahead of ourselves now, because there are a lot of reasons why the 2013 Champions League final will never be forgotten. And to understand why, we've got to go back a bit. Bayern Munich at the start of the 2012-2013 season, they were reeling. You see guys, the club was in a difficult position. It was understandable too. In the space of 3 years, they'd been to 2 Champions League finals and lost both. 2010 versus Inter Milan and 2012 versus Chelsea. The one from 2012 hurt the most. On their turf, against Chelsea, they had the title in their hands and watched it slip toward the end. Chelsea equalised minutes away from the end of normal time. Arjen Robben missed a pen in extra time. And in the shootout, despite Chelsea missing their first kick, Bayern missed twice, and on home turf, watched Chelsea lift the trophy instead.
Wird das nackte Ergebnis irgendwann Champions League-Sieger 2012 FC Chelsea sein? Kein Mensch versteht es, die wahrscheinlich selber nicht. Aber es ist so. Wir müssen uns versuchen, damit abzufinden. Es wird schwer, aber im Moment kann ich es noch nicht fassen, um ehrlich zu sein.
Die deutlich bessere Mannschaft hat verloren. Und dementsprechend ist es einfach bitter. Es ist eine totale Leere natürlich in uns und wir sind bitter enttäuscht. Es wird nicht viel gesprochen, jeder ist mit sich selbst beschäftigt und sitzt mit hängenden Köpfen da natürlich.
Dass jeder hier enttäuscht ist, ist außer Frage. Bastian vor allem natürlich, aber...
Uli Hoeneß, president of the club at the time, Manuel Neuer and Philipp Lahm, when they spoke about the game after, their words had one central theme: disappointment. To lose is one thing, but to lose a final like that in front of your home crowd, and in the type of circumstances like a Champions League final, that's tough. And so, the 2012-13 season was about hitting reset and going again for Bayern. But if we switch camps to Westfalen over to Dortmund, another German was building something special. Jurgen Klopp's Dortmund army was rising fast. How? In a Bayern Munich-dominated system, they didn't just win the league, they won it back-to-back in the 2010-11 and 2011-12 seasons. And while the performances were very impressive domestically, deep down, Jurgen Klopp would have known that if he really wanted to show levels of progress with this team, they'd have to replicate some of that form in Europe. It felt like such a long time since Dortmund last won the Champions League in 1997. And to be fair, based on the fact they'd sort of fallen off after that, and were in a rebuilding phase under Klopp, there weren't that many real expectations for Dortmund heading into the Champions League season of 2012-13. But as the competition progressed, it became clear both teams were building something special. Bayern Munich, in the 2012-13 Champions League group stage, light work. They were drawn against Valencia, baked Borisov and Lille in the group stage, and straight away, Bayern emerged as the heavy odds favourites to qualify. It started with a 2-1 win against Valencia, but on match day 2, Bayern suffered a huge upset. They lost 3-1 to bait Borisov away from home, but in the end, it was only really just a shock defeat. The bounce back was impressive. They beat Lille at home and away and drew with Valencia before beating Bate Borisov 4-1 on the final match day to not just seal qualification, but top the group also. While Bayern had that somewhat easy group, Borussia Dortmund on the other hand, well, they had no choice. In the group they were in, they either impressed to qualify or got knocked out. Ajax, Man City, Real Madrid. Ouch. Everyone expected Real Madrid to qualify, but the battle for second place was always going to be tough, because realistically, even though Man City was still considered new money at the time, each team had a real chance to progress. Dortmund weren't going to sit around and wait for any favours regardless, because that Klopp team, they took matters into their own hands. The first 3 games of the group stage, they beat Ajax at home and drew with City away, before the big result in the group stage. They beat Real Madrid 2-1 at Signal Iduna Park, and halfway through the group stage, they were unbeaten. It was clear Jurgen Klopp was building something. This was more than just a fluke. Why? In the reverse fixtures, they drew with Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, beat Ajax away from home 4-1, and beat Man City to finish the group stage unbeaten and, more importantly, on top. They really did finish first in the group stage with new money and two historic teams in the competition. At this point, before we get into the knockouts, I've just got to talk about the teams, because what Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund were doing was putting German football back on the map again. Bayern have been doing it for a considerable while now. As we touched on earlier, they'd been to 2 Champions League finals in 3 years, and the key to that was the ability to revamp the squad. The 2012-13 season was no exception. After the defeat to Chelsea in the previous campaign, Bayern added depth in key areas. The likes of Dante to bolster the defense, the emerging Swiss Superman Xherdan Shaqiri down the wings, Mario Mandzukic and Claudio Pizarro in attack. But the real addition, the one that really did it for Bayern, was the unsung hero.
Oha, die Aussichten sind ja mal muy mal für Neuzugang Javier Martinez. Tja, da geht's für dich hin. Auf die Bank. Trainer Don Jupp kriegt sich ob des Coups gleich gar nicht mehr ein. Matthias Sammer lacht sich schlapp.
A figure of just around 40 million euros, and this was at a time when inflation hadn't gotten into the game yet, so paying this amount for a player back then was huge. What Bayern had done was add depth to an already impressive team. Arjen Robben, Frank Ribery, Philipp Lahm, Manuel Neuer, Bastian Schweinsteiger – these guys were the mainstays. Then you had players like Toni Kroos, who were putting in steady performances and fighting their way into the first team, and it was all adding up. For Borussia Dortmund, however, it wasn't necessarily about what they added to the team. Nah, it was about what Klopp had built around it. Where they'd lost players like Shinji Kagawa to Manchester United, Dortmund signed arguably the hottest prospect in German football at the time, and Jurgen Klopp straight away had an idea of what he wanted to build with him.
When I joined the club, I already said that I have some plans here together with the club, with the support of the fans, and together with the players. I just have a feeling that it's not over, even if it is, of course, very difficult in our situation at the moment. But I believe in it, and one falls and wins together.
Marco Reus from Borussia Mönchengladbach cost the club 17.1 million euros. But looking at what he was bringing to the team, it could so easily have been 3 times more. The addition of Reus to a team that already had an emerging Robert Lewandowski, Mario Götze turning heads, and Mats Hummels at the hard defense acting as the base. But the best part was what Klopp was doing with the lesser-known players. The likes of Neven Subotic, Marcel Schmelzer, and Jakub Błaszczykowski, players known in the Bundesliga, but not that much outside it. Klopp was building a team with these guys, and a young core too. Reus, Ilkay Gundogan, Lewandowski, Götze, Subotic, Hummels. These guys were all 24 and younger, so it was a young team and very exciting to watch. See guys, what we're doing now is trying to understand the teams and the patterns, the squads both teams built in getting to that final, and how really they shouldn't have. The group stages were done, it was time for the knockouts. Bayern's path? They got drawn against Arsenal in the round of 16, and over 2 legs, it was a confusing result. Why? Well, they won 3-1 at the Emirates, and with away goals still being a thing back then, Arsenal had to score at least 3 or more at the Allianz Arena to stand any chance of qualification. Given the team Bayern had and the result from the first leg, it should have been a straightforward game in the second leg. The thing is, though, it was anything but. Arsenal nearly pulled off a shock result. They came to the Allianz Arena and beat Bayern 2-0. The game finished 3-3 on aggregate, but by away goals, Bayern progressed. It wasn't exactly convincing, but still they'd gone through. Job done. For Borussia Dortmund, their reward for topping that tricky group was a round of 16 clash against Shakhtar Donetsk, and despite drawing their first leg 2-2 away from home, they won 3-0 at the Signal Iduna Park, and in the process sealed qualification. They were through as well. Into the quarterfinals now, and Bayern Munich had yet another tricky game, this time against the then reigning Serie A champions Juventus. But again, they made light work of it. 2-0 at home, 2-0 away, 4-0 on aggregate. and Bayern, for the third time in 4 years, had advanced to the last 4 of the Champions League. It was straightforward for this team, but at Dortmund, they had to get there the crazy way. Borussia Dortmund came up against Malaga in the quarter-finals, and for the ones who remember, this game was a true Champions League epic. Malaga had shocked the world by getting to this stage, and after a 0-0 draw in the first leg, you would have been forgiven for expecting a tense game in the second leg at the Signal Iduna Park. Except that didn't happen. The chaos was on from the off. Jurgen scored almost midway through the first half for Malaga, and as soon as that goal went in, you could hear the shockwaves around the crowd. Because of the away goals rule, it meant at that point there would be no possibility of extra time or penalties. Dortmund didn't just have to score now, they had to score 2 or risk getting eliminated at home. They weren't going down without a fight still, and just 5 minutes before the end, a lifeline.
Coming to his left, Royce, on for Lewandowski, beautifully done, Lewandowski, fabulous, magical goal!
Lewandowski scored, and suddenly Dortmund had hope. All they had to do was score again and they'd be in the clear, trying to hold on. And so, as the game advanced, they came charging at them with everything. Malaga defended the spaces well, and as time went by, it just felt like this game was capable of producing a plot twist at any given moment. And just like that, boom, it happened. Eliseo scored, and with 8 minutes toward the end, Dortmund had to come up with 2 goals or it was game over. You could see it from the home crowd, and here comes the crazy part. They didn't look crestfallen or without hope like they did after the first goal, and I'll tell you why soon. But first, if you're enjoying this video so far and would love to see more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button to Football Historia. The crowd at Signal Iduna Park, despite time running out and needing 2 goals, still believed it was possible. So they turned up the atmosphere inside the stadium, and it was epic. Into added time now, and suddenly they find a way. Royce scored 2-2. They just needed 1 more goal, but we're talking about literal seconds here. The clock was counting down. Dortmund threw players looking for 1 more goal, and it seemed like whoever was writing this script from above decided it would be a good idea to throw a final plot twist into this one. Felipe Santana. I still get goosebumps just rewatching that goal. They went crazy, and the stadium completely lost it. Dortmund had scored 2 goals past the 90-minute mark to turn a 2-1 defeat into a 3-2 win, and they were in the semi-finals of the Champions League. The last 4 of the competition. This is where the big teams are at, no more excuses. The competition had shaped up nicely too, because looking at the 4 teams in the competition, there was a unique chance of making history. Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund, Real Madrid and Barcelona. Bayern had to face Barcelona, with Borussia Dortmund were up against Real Madrid. As I said, it was a chance to make history. Real Madrid and Barcelona were the odds-on favourite to qualify, and if they did, the thought of having an El Clasico final in the Champions League would have been epic cinema. On the other hand, both Bayern and Dortmund had the chance to make history, because if the 2 managed to qualify, it would be an all-German affair in the final. Die Klassiker. Both games were expected to be huge. The first legs delivered too, but just not the way anyone would have thought it would, because honestly, till now, I still struggle to believe those results actually happened. Bayern versus Barcelona in the first leg at the Allianz Arena. This was Bayern's 4th goal. They won the first leg 4-0. They really did beat Barcelona by 4 clear goals in the first leg and still had a second to play. If that result sent shockwaves throughout Europe, it was just part 1. And the football world didn't have to travel that far for part 2, because over at Signal Iduna Park, it was yet another incredible result. A lot of people term this as the match that made Robert Lewandowski, and while he was already scoring impressive goals even before this game, this was the one that put him on the map. Lewandowski 4, Real Madrid 1. Damn. Bayern and Dortmund had put 4 past Barcelona and Real Madrid in the first legs respectively. Europe was in shock. It became intriguing to see what would happen in the second legs then. Dortmund went up first, and honestly, they nearly choked on it. Real Madrid scored twice, and because of the away goal rule, needed just 1 more, and they'd have knocked Dortmund out of the competition. But the goal didn't come, and Dortmund survived. For the first time since 1997, the black and yellow would be competing in the final of the Champions League. This was huge, and we'll get to why soon. But just 24 hours later, Bayern arrived in Spain, this time to Barcelona for the second leg. And unlike Dortmund, who nearly choked on it, Bayern picked up from where they left off. They added 3 more to complete the rout. Bayern Munich 7, Barcelona 0. This wasn't FIFA 13, this was the aggregate scoreline. Bayern didn't just win, they thumped Barcelona and put out a statement too. An all-German affair in the final at Wembley. Finally guys, we're at that moment in Wembley. The ceremonies are done and the teams are about to enter the pitch. At that point, it was evident that this was more than just a moment for both teams. It was huge.
Bayern Munich is where they should be. In the final, they are one of the best teams, maybe the best team in the world in this moment.
In as much as it was all set to be a huge battle between the two, there was nothing but mutual admiration for the Bayern team from Jurgen Klopp. You could hear him talking about the situation in that interview, and he was being brutally honest. Bayern Munich was where they should be, and Dortmund were in a position to challenge them. In the Bayern camp, however, Jupp Heynckes wasn't messing around. He talked tough.
We are very stable mentally. I think nothing can knock us down.
Es wird überhaupt nichts umwerfen, weil wir haben ein ganz klares Ziel, und zwar den Hinkelpotz zu gewinnen.
I mean, this interview had so many receipts waiting. Heynckes talked about how ready his Bayern team was, how nothing could stop them that year, how Juventus and Barcelona had to realize how tough they were. The man wasn't playing games. All the talk said and done, as soon as the ref hit the whistle, it was game on. The UEFA Champions League final of 2013 was all set to be a thriller. One look at the Dortmund team, and there was one noticeable absentee, Mario Götze. He'd been injured in the weeks leading up to the final, and on top of that had just signed a pre-agreement to join Bayern Munich at the end of the season. Tough. Bayern put out the team many expected to start, Robben and Ribery down the flanks, Thomas Müller operating in the space just behind Mandzukic, Dante and Jerome Boateng as centre-backs, Manuel Neuer in goal, and captain Philipp Lahm at right-back and David Alaba at left-back. In the opening exchanges, it was Dortmund who dominated the game. Błaszczykowski forced Neuer to a good save, and Lewandowski had the German goalie tipping one over the bar, and the game was still only heating up. Bayern hadn't gotten into the game and needed a whistle to rejig, and once they did, they had their moments too. Mandzukic came close with a header, Weidenfeller had to tip over the bar. Müller came close, and Weidenfeller again had to come out to deny Robben when he looked through on goal. The match was heating up. Both teams continued to create chances, and at that point, the only thing stopping them from scoring was the respective goalkeepers on both ends, Neuer for Bayern and Weidenfeller for Dortmund. But in a game like this, it was always going to be decided by the team that could quickly produce moments of magic, and minutes into the second half, Bayern found the spark. Ribery and Robben combined, and the latter found Mandzukic at the far post, who tapped in the opener. 1-0 Bayern. They had the lead in the final, just like they did 12 months back. Klopp knew he had to galvanise his team. They simply had to do more to find a way back into the game, and pretty soon the opportunity came. Crazy tackle on Royce by Dante, and Dortmund now had the perfect chance to get the leveller in the final. İlkay Gündoğan stepped up to take it, and bang! He didn't miss. 1-1 at Wembley, and this final was living up to expectations. The game was wide open now. Both teams were trying to go for the win when Bayern carved out an incredible chance. Müller found the pass to Robben at the back post, but Neven Subotic somehow pulled off the craziest goal line clearance in a final you'll ever see. Bayern took full control of the match at that point, and Dortmund was hanging on. It seemed like all the tough talk Heynckes displayed in that interview was no joke. As the game pushed on to the closing minutes, Bayern kept the pressure up. Alaba forced Weidenfeller into a crazy save. Schweinsteiger had a pot shot at goal, Weidenfeller parried away. They kept coming close, and at some point all that pressure was bound to pay off. And it did. If we pause after the goal right here, this was a full circle moment for Robben. Just 12 months back, he'd had the chance to put Bayern a goal up in the final versus Chelsea in extra time, and missed the pen. And now a year later, he just scored the goal to all but seal the Champions League win for Bayern. Incredible! With 89 minutes gone, it was almost too late for Dortmund to mount any sort of comeback. I mean, they did try, but at this point, it was clear that Bayern had wrapped the game up, and at full time, the scenes were incredible. Bayern Munich had finally done it. After 2 defeats in 3 years, and a third attempt, they'd finally banished any Champions League ghost to win the big one, the Champions League. And amid all the celebrations, you just had to spare a thought for Dortmund. That they'd come that far was already impressive enough. Jurgen Klopp had taken a Dortmund team that was struggling for mid-table form in the Bundesliga when he arrived, won the league back-to-back with them, and had now gotten the black and yellow to a first Champions League final since 1997, playing some exciting football along the way. Beautiful. But all the focus was on Bayern. Champions League winners, Bundesliga winners, and a week after winning the biggest competition in European football, they added the DFB Pokal to complete the feat. Treble winners. The achievement was as impressive as it looked. Jupp Heynckes, in his last season with the club, had won the treble with Bayern, defeating the best in the country and the continent along the way. Now that's something. The 2013 Champions League final was definitely special, but the one from 2011? It was mouth-watering. 2 of the best coaches in the world going head-to-head. The new school versus the old generation. It was everything a football fan couldn't miss, and neither should you. Click the next video to find out why the 2011 Champions League final will never be forgotten.